that.
Welcome, Lotta, Eva, Alexander, and Hanneke. You are in Sweden. We are going to discuss some studies of you within the European Sexual Medicine Network, one of the subgroups you are part of, with a very interesting topic concerning COVID and sexuality. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Lotta Lofgren. I'm a professor in sexology. I'm also a working group leader of the interdisciplinary research group within the COST Sexual Medicine Network. And for this group today, we are going to talk about one of the subgroups, and it's about COVID-19 and intimacy and sexuality within long-term relationships.
Eva?
Yeah, my name is Eva Elmestig, and I'm associate professor in Health and Society, field of sexology here at Malmö University. And I'm involved in this project.
I'm Alexander Stolhofer. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Zagreb in Croatia.
I'm Hanneke de Graaf. I work at Rutgers in the Netherlands, which is not a university, but a center of expertise on sexual and reproductive health.
All right, your European cooperation led you into a study of COVID and sexuality. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yes, we started this study because we already knew each other, and we had the opportunity to start quite quickly with 8 countries, 7 European countries and Turkey during the pandemic. So we have one qualitative part of this study and one quantitative. It's the same study, so we will tell you more about that.
Do you want to start with tell a little bit about the qualitative study?
Well, I think we start with the quantitative part because
okay, sorry,
sorry,
I'm mistaken.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
The quantitative study, yes.
Yeah. So basically, this is the first part of the COVID pandemic, and we are thinking what we were discussing over Zoom. But the idea to see what happens with basically sexuality within long-term couples during the lockdowns and everything, the panic. And we started collecting data from May to June 2020. So this is still the first phase of the pandemic, right? We designed a very brief questionnaire, so nobody would have to take more than 8 to 10 minutes. Basically, we asked people about what's going on with their sexuality, with their relationships, but also with other chores under the lockdown. For example, a lot of people, especially women, the children had to readjust to homeschooling, TV school. Our main focus was what happens to the desire, or maybe to put it differently, what happens to sexual interest between long-term partners when they're under the lockdown conditions. And what we found, and the interesting part is that this finding holds across all 8 countries, so including Turkey, was that for more than 50% of people, nothing actually changed. You know, they were locked, they had to readjust their daily routines with this complex emergency, and yet they reported that their sexual interest remained essentially the same. So around 50%, a little bit more. Then the next big group is the people who actually experienced increase in sexual interest, right? Which was kind of unexpected. And certainly you have to take into consideration that this is the first phase. We don't know what happened a year later. The next thing that I will mention, and then Hanneke can tell us a little bit more about the study in the Netherlands, was basically that we also noted some gender-specific differences. So this relative stability of sexual interest was cross-cultural. Now, also what was cross-cultural was some differences between men and women in these relationships. It was mainly women who reported, if there was a decrease in interest, it was mainly reported by women. And also if there was a distress, and there was not a lot of distress even among the couples where one of them or both experienced a decrease in sexual interest, there was not a lot of distress about it. Obviously, people are, reasonable beings, and, there's a pandemic, what do you expect, right? So, but men were slightly more distressed than women, okay? And finally, one of the factors that we found was really important in sort of keeping the sexual interest stable or even increasing was the quality relationship, as you probably would guess. The quality relationship before the pandemic was one of the main predictors of the lack of distress and actually the absence of any substantial decrease in sexual interest.
Yeah, and also the Netherlands participated. What I really liked was that there was such a common relevance in all those countries, and we could act so quickly because, we were already in a network, and we managed to set up such a nice study in such a short time. And we all, translated the questionnaire in our countries, and we discussed about the differences, and we came up with a good questionnaire that could be distributed. And also the data collection went very fast. It was quite successful in the Netherlands. We managed to get a newspaper on board, and they posted recruitment link on their website in a short article. And in a short period of time, we had a nice data set collected, and we could go analyzing, and also some interesting findings that we didn't expect. I think this is a nice bridge also to the qualitative study, because we included also one open question in the end, and we had no specific purpose. We didn't know what to expect there, but there was such interesting data there. So there, the colleagues of the qualitative study picked it up and started analyzing this open-ended question at the end.
And did you find the same results as in the rest of Europe?
We wrote a paper on all the countries together, so we didn't write country-specific papers. We did find some differences between the countries, but it's really hard to interpret the differences because mainly the recruitment methods of the participants were recruited a bit differently in all those countries, and also a bit different periods of time. It depended sometimes a few weeks, but also the lockdown measures were a bit different in those countries. So we didn't actually interpret the differences between the countries because we thought it was too tricky to draw any conclusions about them.
There was what you asked actually was asked by a few reviewers of our paper. And then we said, it would not be a good idea to try to compare. And this is what Hanneke said first, because our samples were convenience samples. So they don't represent any national population. Still, it's nice when you see that there is a consistency, like with these changes, because that means there is something there which doesn't change from culture to culture. And secondly, the anti-pandemic regimes were so different in each country, and also sometimes different by region. Take Italy, for example, the north of Italy with huge problems, and then the south where people were just kind of wondering what's going on. So in that case, we didn't really do any national comparisons. And they're still hard to do because also the data from the countries, epidemiological data, still kind of disbalanced, and there are many issues that epidemiologists have about how to really compare the countries throughout this pandemic period.
And what would your conclusion of this quantitative study be? What could you say in general about it?
Again, this is about the first part of the pandemic. What was interesting when we analyzed our data, our findings were quite different from the majority of other studies done in the same period, because most other studies found a decrease in sexual interest. And we argued that this is because they mainly sampled individuals. And individuals under lockdown have different kinds of problems in context of sexuality and intimacy than couples. So there were two things that we were thinking were sort of take-home messages. One is, people can deal very effectively, even in terms of sexuality, under complex emergency, when they have good relationships. But that's just across the board, that's the main message. Secondly, and it was kind of unexpected finding, was, okay, what are the motives that people have sex for? And you can broadly say, well, there are people who want to avoid sex. That's not interesting it was not interesting for us. But then people who approach sexuality positively, they can do it primarily because because they think it will benefit their contact, their relationship with the partner, or because they simply want to have, pleasure, experience, excitement, and stuff. So you can call the first type like relationship-based approach to sexuality, and the second one like more ego-centered approach to sexuality. What we found is actually that the stability of sexual interest was the highest in couples where partners were perceiving sex primarily through the individual lenses. We have sex because each of us wants to feel good. So ego-centered approach to sex was somehow the most beneficial for our couples in this complex emergency that we were calling COVID-19.
That's very interesting. Was this also a result of the qualitative study? Did the qualitative study align with the results of the quantitative study? Or can you tell me first maybe a little bit about the qualitative study?
Yes, as Hanneke said, the last question within the questionnaire was an open-ended question. Summarize your sex life. So it was very brief, open question, and people could answer whatever. And we got 3,357 participants who answered that question. And that's quite a lot for being a qualitative study. So I would say this is kind of a mixed of qualitative and quantitative studies. So we did reflexive thematic analysis, and then 3 themes occurred. And I would like Eva maybe to say something more about that.
And so what we found was almost the same as the quantitative, because it's the same data, but we get more into what they felt and what they expressed themselves in these few lines with open-ended questions or answers. So what we found was that priority, as in the quantitative, was they didn't, it became no change when it comes to they described no change when summarizing the sex life. So the pandemic didn't affect their sex life in that sense. It was, for some, it was as good as before. They had great sex life before, and it was good even during the pandemic. And for others, it was as bad as before. So they had different issues and problems, and it was as bad as before. So some people said that it was no change, but for some it was a more positive change. They were more satisfied, and what they described were that they had more intimacy, more closeness. They had also more time, less stress, they worked from home and they could have having sex, new ways of having sex, for example, during lunchtime or during the day. So for some, it was more, they were more satisfied and felt a positive change because it was totally different ways of having sex. For some, it was also more through digital sexual activities that they tried to find new ways. So that was also what they described. But there were also a group who described negative change. It was lack of space for both home office and sex. They had no privacy. They were too close. There were families, relatives, grandparents, and a lot of different people in the house, and they were closed in a house or in an apartment. And they also felt more stress, sickness, and more quarrel. You say quarrel? Yeah. So they also described that this was more difficult for them, and also lack of other sex partners that they usually have. It was difficult to have the extramarital sex partner, for example, when they were closed in a house or couldn't go out in that way that they have done before. So it was free, no change, positive change or negative change.
And from these three things, then we could see it like a overarching theme. So we call it still the same trajectories, but a pandemic could be catalyzed for improved or worsened sex life. So it's in the same line as the quantitative data, but we can get more of a picture of it, how they describe it, and with which words. We can also see the despair in the ones who had worsened sex life, and we can also see that joy with those who had better sex life. And again, more like a pragmatic description from those who have same before. So our conclusion for this is that it's important to find those who have vulnerable situation within the relationship earlier, because we really don't know what happened with them through the whole pandemic. This was in the beginning, and they were in this despair from the beginning. And our wish could be to go back and maybe to have a study and look, if you look back to the pandemic, what are your experiences now, or how would you describe the situation now when looking back in the mirror?
And what would your future plans be in this respect? Maybe with this data set, or maybe with a new research question and a new data set?
First, we have so much data, and you can tell one idea.
Because the material we have collected is extensive. So we have thoughts about doing some more analysis. And for one thing is we would like to look more into gender aspects, because we seem to see some differences. And you said it also in terms with the quantitative. So we would like to examine the material more, for example, with gender aspects. And also we would like to do more mixed method study than we did with this, even if we used it's a few. The qualitative data it's a lot of different persons, but there are a few words or that we analyze. But we would like to do something with the quantitative data and to combine it with the qualitative data in a different way. So that would be good to do. yeah, so, and I think it would be interesting to see, even if this was the first phase of the pandemic, we would like to dig into some, to see more patterns that is highly relevant even after the pandemic. So that, yeah, we have plans to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there something you would like to add?
Well, finally, I think we would like to just stress the fact that we had the opportunity due to that we were already a research network within Europe. We knew each other before, and we had this easy way of connecting to each other and to collaborate and to work quite quick during a phase where the society was changing so much. So therefore, we are grateful for the COST network.
Yes, that was very advantageous, I would say. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.